This is Call on the Field Stands podcast. Ryan Denshev, along with myself, Jeff Mapis. Got some Hopsecutioner by Terrapin out of Athens, Georgia here tonight. Pretty delicious beer. I'd highly recommend it. So, Ryan, this weekend in the NFL, officials made the headlines instead of some of the other big games we saw.
Again, did the officials make the headlines. It's starting to become a trend, and I know everyone's talking about it, and there's not a whole lot of new, innovative thought processes that we can really get into here, because it is literally everywhere on every major network, on every major sports show. But these refs, something's got to be done, bro. Like you said, all the talk is on the refs and how they're fucking games, and it's not on the games. It's not on these teams that are kind of coming out of nowhere. It's not on the whole dynamic of certain teams that, like the Bills, who we thought were going to suck, and they're like relevant. Like all these different storylines that should be the talk of the NFL, and instead it's on the refs. It's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it's not really a good look for the league. Unfortunately,
it's a terrible look.
Unfortunately, I don't think viewership is going to take a hit.
No.
Not a significant hit anyway. That would really spark change, but
and that's kind of the bottom line. The owners give a fuck about only dollars, and if it's really not going to impact them, why are they going to make much movement to make it change? Until it does impact them, I don't know where that will come from. What do you think the main issue is, though, with these refs? We're seeing them literally make plays that are costing teams wins. And you hear the narrative of, oh, well, you got to overcome the refs. The refs have been shitty for forever. Fuck that. We're seeing teams that do enough to win, especially the Lions. I mean, the Lions game was super ridiculous. So what do you think is the issue, and what do you think how do you think it can be addressed and stuff like that?
First off, I can't stand that statement either. Like, yeah, you should play the game so that you take the game out of the officials' hands. Like, these athletes play their asses off all game. These coaches are also putting a lot of time and effort into it and their heart into it. They're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, like, they're not going to play this flawless, magical game, every single week to week, where, yeah, there are going to be instances where down the stretch, an official can make a call that impacts the game. It just is what it is. They should be held accountable, and really the main issue is there have probably been egregious calls, dating back since the birth of football that impacted games. But today, and this is not rocket science, and I think everyone knows it, today with technology, you and I can watch every single game week to week, whether it's through streaming or you're paying for some sort of add-on to where you have access to watch every game. The broadcasting, for the consumer has only gotten improved. You get every single angle. You get slow-mo replay. I mean, they have even added GoPros in the freaking pylon.
And they're saying there's angles that they see that we don't even see on the TV.
So you've got it all. And whenever there's a big play or a crappy call that impacted a game, I mean, it's all over social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I can just search on Twitter, if D-Hop makes a big play, I can search his name, and I seriously get, I mean, it fills up with every different angle of his big play that he made. So when there's a call, when there's a bad call, it blows up. I mean, it's all over social media like that the same day. Everyone knows about it.
NFL officials is trending on Twitter, not Aaron Rodgers.
Right. So they're under a microscope, and, they're humans too. They're going to make mistakes, and that's fine. But something needs to be done because, like we said, it's not good for the sport. And I don't understand why, with all the, what I just hit on, all these different angles and availability they have, what would be so difficult about putting a couple people up in the booth and paying them as officials to literally dissect every single play that plays out? And even if a ref doesn't throw a flag and he misses an egregious pass interference call, they buzz down to him and say, "Hey, dipshit,
You fucked up.
I think you missed this pass interference. You need to throw that fucking flag."
And it could be on, agrees, because that's really been the I think the point that a lot of people are now talking about, and on all these big shows like we've mentioned. That's been, I think, a universal solution that everybody agrees, like, okay, this would make a lot of sense. This could seriously solve so many issues. Just have a dude up in the top who's just watching the replays like we're watching at home. And it would be a seamless thing where he could just buzz down and be like, "Oh, you fucking missed that one." Or, "Oh, let's not throw that flag on hands to the face because he actually didn't touch him in the face." Or, "Oh, Nick Chubb just got face masked the fuck out of him on fourth down and goal, and you missed that one. And that's a game-changing play that you missed." And it doesn't even have to be some is that if there's a question by that guy up there at the top of the booth, like if it's a question for that person in the moment, then maybe you just don't do anything. But if it's like obvious, okay,
right,
you called a block or a crackback block on Jarvis Landry when he got creamed by the linebacker or the safety.
He did not even initiate the contact.
Or like that one from a couple weeks ago that we mentioned on the podcast, T.Y. Hilton getting charged for a pick or whatever, pass interference on a pick route where he literally just ran, stopped, stood there, and intentionally avoided the defender, and they called him for pass interference.
That happened to Dallas also. The receiver ran, a quote pick route. So he starts to do, the outside receiver starts to do a slant. He doesn't even initiate anything. The defender literally fucking grabs him, and then the slot receiver ran an out, and he was wide open for a touchdown.
Yeah, and the main thing that I have the issue with the whole ref situation is, yes, calls are going to get missed. Holdings are going to get missed, especially in the trenches. Shit gets missed. But it's particularly disturbing when you see things that are reviewable under the new rules, whether it's pass interference or otherwise. They review them, and then they still uphold the call on the field that was blatantly wrong to everybody watching the screen. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? You have the rule in place for a reason. This is the opportunity to use it, and you intentionally say, "Yeah, you know what? Fuck them. I'm not going to do anything."
It makes no sense.
That's the part that doesn't make sense. And we talk about what would be able to initiate the change. What about? I wonder how sports gambling and the widespread legalization of sports gambling, how that might impact the referees and the NFL, almost forcing the NFL's hand to actually doing something. If there's an influx, there's going to be money to be made out the fucking ass with sports gambling, whether it's, I think Chicago allows sports gambling, and they were talking about how Wrigley Field and the Cubs can integrate gambling in fucking Wrigley Field. Like, you can place bets in the stadium. So what says that that's not obviously going to get, incorporated in the NFL? You have millions of dollars flooding into these organizations through sports gambling and whatever kind of laws and regulations that get put in place that they take their cut or whatever the case may be. If referees are beginning to impact individuals gambling and, maybe they think, I want to put money on this game, but the refs are so fucked and a stupid ass call can fuck me. Maybe I don't put this money down on this game. And now the NFL owners are losing money. Maybe that might have some influence or something like that. But who knows how long that's going to be down the road. I mean, it's just kind of, I'm just trying to think of ways like what could possibly make anything change, because the NFL owners only give a fuck about money, and ratings aren't going to change. No one's going to stop watching. There might be a few people who say, these refs suck so bad, I'm not going to watch the NFL. The ratings aren't going to go down as a whole. NFL is too big.
The ratings are, I saw, I wish I had the credit to the website or whoever shared the stat, but NFL games are averaging like 6 million viewers, like the primetime games. And when you compare to baseball, it's a fraction. It's only at like 5.6 million compared to 6 million for the NFL.
I thought it was,
and it's just regular season.
I think you sent it to me, and I thought it was even more than that. I mean, just off the top of my head memory, but I thought it was something like double the NFL playoffs were what the ratings were getting for the NFL. But NFL games averaging 16.4 million views in 2019, up 6%. By comparison, the most watched MLB playoff game has been Game 5 of the NLDS, Nats versus Dodgers, drawing 5.86 million viewers.
16-5.
So 3 times as many viewers are watching, on average, any NFL game compared to
A playoff game.
Game 5 of the NLDS.
Yeah.
So the ratings aren't going anywhere. People aren't going to stop watching, but
No, drastic changes happen when people feel their pockets being
their profits
impacted.
are being exactly.
So, I mean, the gambling thing is definitely interesting, especially with the legalization of it state to state. And here's what's interesting. What about the odds makers and how they're affected by a certain officiating crew?
Sure.
So
This officiating crew tends to do this poorly, or tends to give the home team this many advantageous calls or something. I mean,
I can guarantee they're tracking it because they're affecting games.
There's going to be stats.
I guarantee they're watching crew to crew. You know, the crews typically stay together. We're through the season a little bit. You can absolutely track tendencies of the crews. So,
but it's just regardless, like something needs to change, and it's pretty obvious to anybody who's paying any attention. And you know, like we were talking about, let's just add an official. People might say, "Oh, it's just going to murky up the waters even more." No, it won't. I mean, there will be instances where you'll think, "Why the fuck did they not change this?" But for the majority of instances, that guy will make, or girl, I guess, will make the right call happen in an instant, and it won't impact the flow of the game. And actually, it'll probably speeden it up because now you won't have to call or throw the challenge flag on, you know, certain instances where the guy up in the stands will be like, "Oh, that's pretty fucking obvious.
Yeah,
let me just buzz down. Oh, he surely did get into the end zone. Pretty obvious. Let's buzz down and say, hey, yeah, he's in." Or nope, you might want to take another look.
Right. And it's like you said, you don't need them dissecting every single play, watching for holding. Like we don't need to be.
Let's just, or maybe
it's nothing like that.
Only look into the flags that are actually thrown. Like, don't say, "Oh, you missed that throw."
But go back to
isn't that what college does? I think college does a similar situation.
Go back to the whole playoff game last year between the Rams and the Saints.
Yeah, but
no
pass
flag was
interference
thrown.
is an entirely different rule, though. Even today,
sure,
you can challenge it.
They did make that rule, and because of that. But no, I don't think it should be just only on flags thrown. I think it should be the blatant stuff, whether there's a flag thrown or not. You should have someone, dude, before the next play, we get a replay on stuff like that because the officials take time to discuss it anyway before they announce.
Right.
I mean,
buzz down to him like, yeah.
And here's the thing, even no matter what system they have, it's not going to be flawless.
Sure.
You're still going to have, it's still a human error, and that's fine. And you're still going to have fans that are going to bitch up a fucking storm, no matter what system is in there and what calls happen. That's just. That kind of stuff isn't going away, but it needs to be mitigated to the best extent possible. You have the technology now. The NFL sure as shit has the money to put 2 more people up in the booth to watch these replays in live time. So
yeah, and then that also kind of mitigates things. If you have 2 guys, they're both up there, they disagree in that instant, fuck it, leave it. Don't do anything about it.
Yeah. If it can
go, that's pretty obvious. Boom, change.
If it can go either way, like you're, hawing around about it a little bit, okay, no change. Let it roll. That's fine.
It's just, and like you said, everything's not going to be changed. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll get a lot better. And it has gotten very bad, and to the point, especially with, like you said, all this technology we have available and all the things we're seeing and all the things you can, theoretically believe, okay, we just saw this. Why can't we just change it in just as quickly as we just saw this? So that, I think, is what needs to actually be implemented. But I don't know. You don't really hear any movement or motion or anything going on from Goodell or anybody of the higher.
The NFL is only ever reactive. It's not. It's like they're never out ahead of their issues. And again, they usually don't have to be because they dominate the sports market in general. Let alone there's no other sort of professional football league that. Takes away viewers from them. I mean, it's quite the monopoly. They get a free farm system from college. Like they have a lot of power. There's a lot of dollars coming in. Like there's little that impacts. I mean, even with the whole people kneeling for the national anthem and people getting on social media saying, "Oh, I'm boycotting the NFL. I'm not going to watch." Guess what? I don't give a fuck. I'm going to watch. I love football. Back. I am, viewership did not really get hurt. Like
it didn't.
People love football. They're going to watch football. It just is what it is.
They still reacted more then. They, stopped broadcasting the national anthem on TV, and that kind of quieted things down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yet they won't do any. I mean, I guess that's the only thing. They have implemented the new pass interference rule, so I guess that's a step in the right direction. However, when actually you get the flag, fucking dude never wants to change anything. Riveron or whatever his name is.
That whole thing, that's so weird.
It's like he's
I don't
intentionally
understand.
not overturning calls for one reason or another, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So they need to do something. I don't know what it's just going to be interesting to see, like, what is the, straw that breaks the camel's back of Goodell. It's like, okay, now we'll do something.
Right.
Like, when is it enough? When is enough? Like, okay, we talk about the Rams Saints and how much that was talked about and still is. That blatant pass interference, and there was nothing they could do because the rules dictated what the rules dictated. But there are other instances, like the other night, like that game is almost just as important. Like, yeah, that's the game that goes to the Super Bowl, but if they got fucked in week 3 and it cost them a spot to the playoffs, they're never in that situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, every game is equally as important. It's almost like they're waiting for something catastrophic or monumental to happen, and then be like, okay, now we'll do something because look at what it impacted. A game in week 6 is just as impactful as a game in week 16.
Yeah, you need wins. I mean, a win is a win.
There's only 16 weeks in the season, and if you're getting fucked and losing a game because of a referee, that's unacceptable on all levels. And maybe that's why it is a little bit more lenient in like the NBA, the NBA refs seem actually pretty good, but MLB as well. It's like, there's so many games, it kind of gets overshadowed a little bit unless it's in one of those critical moments. Every moment is critical in all sports, but particularly when you have 16 weeks. If a team gets fucked in week 6 and it costs them that one game that costs them a playoff spot or the division, people aren't going to be able to remember, like, remember 15 weeks ago and week 3 when fucking so-and-so got that blatant face mask and ripped his helmet off and they never called the penalty. Which we've seen. Like, I don't know.
The thing with NBA officiating and Major League Baseball umpires, some of that stuff is more subjective, like a block versus a charge. Like, it happens live.
True.
In football, yes, there is subjectivity, but for hands to the face, the dude is either fucking putting his hands in the face or he is not putting his hands in the face. Like,
he either grabbed his face mask or he didn't.
Right.
He either hit him before the ball was there or he didn't.
Right. And I understand,
that makes sense.
NFL moves a lot faster. I think plays act out. And
you got the best athletes in the world, and you got 55-year-old white dudes running around with fucking best athletes in the world trying to keep up.
They're not going to
make mistakes. That's why we have technology. Let's utilize the technology. Why are the NFL and people so afraid to adapt with technology?
Exactly.
Oh, it's gonna impact the game negative. It's gonna, be bad for the sanctity of the game. It's like, fuck, what? We need to adapt with the tech. We have a tool that will enable us to get more plays right and more calls correct than costing teams for no reason.
Yeah.
Why would we not look for every opportunity to implement that? Almost like the automatic strike zone in an MLB. I'm cool with that. If they can find and develop a reliable automatic strike zone situation, why would you not want to do that? I'd rather have umpires miss calls. What kind of fucking sense does that make? I would rather have NFL refs miss calls because it adds to the game. It's not all, boom, boom, cut and dry and this and that. Human error is an element that you have to overcome and deal with.
Fuck that. Fuck that.
If you have the opportunity and the technology to get it right, why would you not want to? That's just what I don't get. I'm just going to be interested to see what it is that actually forces the hand of the decision makers and makes something change, because it needs to in a big way.
Well, like the play last year, that did spark change, and the change flat out sucks so far. So
it's a good thought, but it never gets implemented correctly.
Yeah. So, anywho, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe down the road, we will see that play that really puts it over the top.
Like, I hope, like you said, I hope it's not to the point where it's reactive, where it is that play or that moment that costs the team a Super Bowl again, and then we're like, okay, now we'll fucking do it. Let's get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Let's do something now when the opportunity is right in front of you.
I don't think you're going to see anything this season. Like, I don't think they're going to come up with some new system or make some drastic change from the NFL mid-season. But
unfortunately, I agree.
But hopefully, like you're saying, this year you don't see something drastic like
Yeah.
that, and they just make the change in the offseason. Whatever it is, there are other solutions out there like making the officials, full time, increasing their salary,
Do that too.
more training.
Do that also.
Whatever you can do to hold more accountability to them and to help them improve, not just, like I said, I don't want to scrutinize every little thing an official does. I don't think that's good for the game. I don't think that's good for the officials. They just need to find some sort of common ground, pay them more, make them full time, get that replay system implemented with 2 guys up in the booth watching. And
that's the easiest, most obvious solution.
It's so obvious.
Get past the fact that they haven't even, no one has, like Goodell or one of his
Hey, I'll fucking do it.
underlings.
I'll quit my job right now. I'll say the hell with this podcast, and I will sit up there and buzz down to the
Give us
officials.
some good content. What do you mean quit the podcast? Fuck.
If they're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to these officials, sign me up.
Hey, they never
Sit
told,
up in the booth.
They never told you not to come on the Call on the Field Stands podcast and talk about it.
Hell yeah. So elsewhere in the NFL, we had a couple trades transpire this past week.
Yeah, man.
Both involve the Rams. They send first Marcus Peters to the Ravens, and then
That blows for me and the Browns.
yes,
I don't like that at all.
no,
He's good.
he's pretty solid.
But maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's not as
People have said he's
like
struggled
a
this year.
4th rounder or something like that.
He's a Pro Bowler. That's all I know. So when I hear a Pro Bowler is going to our rival team,
Right, that's what I'm
I'm
saying.
a little worried. But people have said he has struggled this year. But I'm not, he was a Pro Bowler at one time. It's not like he drastically changed. So yes, I do not like seeing him go to the Ravens. But then back on the Rams, they trade a couple first-round picks to get Jalen Ramsey from the Jaguars. Huge acquisition for the
sauce.
Rams.
Sauce. We got Aqib Talib on the IR. So I'm like, fuck it. Let's replace him with arguably the best corner in the league.
Yeah. They've already got the best defender in the league.
The best player in the league.
Donald, probably.
The best player in the league.
He's a stud.
It's cool to see big blockbuster trades, nearing the trade deadline. And I think that is going to have a big impact. I mean, the Rams are still right there. I don't know what their record is, and they didn't have
3-3.
3-3. So they're right there. Jared Goff isn't. I mean, I never really had faith that Jared Goff was really anything all that special, and it almost looks like McVay's offense and his, scheme that apparently was untouchable and unbeatable for a couple years there. Seems like teams are starting to figure that out a little bit, but when you have a defense like you mentioned with who might be the best corner and paired up with, in my opinion, the best player overall and obviously the best defensive player in the league, that defense was legit before that trade, and it's even legit now more so. The Rams have propelled themselves into that discussion of teams that we've been talking about of who can make a run and who's going to win the Super Bowl. We kind of slept on them a little bit and haven't mentioned them a couple times, or the past couple times we've been talking about teams that are going to be, pushing for that championship game and ultimately the Super Bowl. I think the Rams are in there. What do you think?
Yeah, I still think the Rams are in there. Look, the NFL, everyone calls it a copycat lead. It has its ups and downs. One team finds a solution versus an innovator. Other teams are going to copy that and continue to adapt. That's what's happening right now. It's not that the Rams are, getting blown out game to game. It's not like they have these significant issues. And I still trust Sean McVay to get the ship steered back in the correct direction. But that division is tough this year.
Yeah,
and the 49ers are.
That's the thing, too. Like, NFL defensive coordinators and defensive personnel, they're pretty fucking smart. Like, you see these wild, innovative things that come in, whether it's the Wildcat or, running quarterbacks, whatever the case may be, and they dominate, and all of a sudden people think, this is going to take over the league, and it's just going to change the dynamic of the league. And all of a sudden, NFL, coordinators, defensive personnel guys figure the shit out. And like you said, it's a copycat league. So one team figures it out. All of a sudden, everyone's got the tape on how to stop this, and then the league adapts, and the Wildcat is shut down instantly and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go and say like I really know the ins and outs of how ultimately McVay's offense was so successful. I know it was a lot of those short passes. I know the RPO kind of stuff, and Todd Gurley implementing him in situations that took pressure off Jared Goff, all that kind of stuff. But what made him so dominant scheme-wise, NFL teams are starting to figure that out. And the best coaches are ones who can adjust to teams adjusting to them and find ways to exploit the defenses adjusting to them again. And like you said, I have faith that Sean McVay is one of those minds that is going to be able to find ways to attack defense that have been adjusting to his style of offense over the past few years. I think they're all the way legit, man. And adding Jalen Ramsey is a big time, not even just a big time boost on their defense, but just think that locker room right now. Like
they're pumped.
Yeah.
Just
your
added a stud
organization just
player.
added. They're going out, 3-3. They go out and add one of the best defensive players in the league.
Bro, he wanted to leave to
hyped.
go to a winning team. He's fucking pumped too. Not only is he getting out of Jacksonville, he's going to a team that went to the Super Bowl last year and still is motivated to get back there. So, no, it's a huge deal, huge acquisition. And the Rams have shown this last year as well. They're all in on investing to get to that championship. And they kind of just sacrificed their short and kind of long-term, more so intermediate future by trading first-round picks. Say what you want about Jared Goff. Do we think he's a high-level quarterback? Is he just average?
Average at best.
Exactly. So, I don't even know that this trade signifies that they fully trust Goff long term. I think it is. They're in win mode right now.
They realize he's good enough.
They see the window where him with McVay is good enough. They've got Todd Gurley. They've got this stout offensive line. They've got Donald. They have other pieces on
wide receiving core
defense.
Is stacked.
Yeah, they've got the talent now. Why not go all in and say, hey, we'll take a Super Bowl now. Maybe be good, next couple of years, and then maybe kind of suck for a few years, but you build to get back to that. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about. I mean, we've almost haven't seen what's going on in the NFL right now when you pair teams tanking with teams that are looking to fill the window of opportunity with as much success and winning as currently possible before you have to pay out all these guys. Like it's almost like the formula is. Get a young quarterback on a rookie deal, stack everywhere else, and with other guys who are young and on rookie deals, and try to win. I mean, the Browns are trying to do it right now. The Chiefs have done it and are doing it right now. Their defense kind of sucks, but we'll see kind of what happens with the trade deadline coming up in that regard. But they're good. I mean, we saw they were a D-Ford offensive or defensive lining up in the neutral zone away from going to the Super Bowl last year. They got Pat Mahomes on a rookie deal. You have Jared Goff's kind of similar situation, but he's a little bit older than that now. But it's interesting to see like teams, like you said, going all out, almost like what teams do in the NBA and MLB right before the trade deadline, which I think trade deadline is about to ramp up here in the next week and a half. And we're going to see some stuff. Like we already saw Minka Fitzpatrick traded for a first-round pick. We saw Jalen Ramsey, 2 first-rounders. And even if you date back to a little bit right before the season, OBJ, you had Laramie Tunsil going for first-rounders. And I think it's only going to be even more so, picking up here once the trade deadline. I think it's the 26th? No. It's a Tuesday and the 26th is a Sunday. 29th, something like that. So right towards the end of the month. So it's coming up. And, you got these teams tanking who don't give a fuck about their good players. We already saw the Dolphins. They don't think they have much left to trade. But there's going to be teams that are just going to start unloading players to get picks in return. Trent Williams is probably going to get traded. We'll see if he brings first-round value for the Redskins. And I guarantee he's going to get traded to a team that is pushing to win now mode. What do you see in the whole trade deadline and the dynamic of, how everything's kind of shaping up right now in the NFL so far as teams, like you said, trying to do their win now mode paired with teams tanking? And how do you think that's going to kind of impact the league in the short term and maybe even the long term going forward? Like, what's your thoughts on what's going on right now I guess is the question. What do you think?
So I think with the dynamic of teams, they either started fire sailing or just downright suck, to straight up tanking like the Dolphins, versus teams in win now mode, you're going to see more significant trades like you saw today. Not that, the Jaguars are kind of in that limbo mode right now. Like they have decisions to make on what they're going to do. And one was, okay, Jalen Ramsey, really good player, doesn't necessarily want to be here. We can get a bunch of picks for him and start building for the future. They'll probably be posed with other difficult decisions with free agency, coming up in the future in the next couple of seasons with their players. But I think you're going to see the teams in win now mode that think they can win with their quarterback and they have other roster pieces in place heavily pursue going out to these other teams like the Dolphins and the Jaguars and trading their picks. Especially if they have a quarterback they think they can play with. Like, you can build your roster without a first round pick if you already have some pieces in place, especially your quarterback. So,
well, yeah, the Rams aren't going to have a first round pick, at least until 2021 or something like that. Like, you haven't had a pick in the last 3 years, a first rounder. Yeah. And now they're not going to have one for another 2 or something. It's going to be like a 5-year window where they just don't have a first round pick. Went to a Super Bowl, might go to another one. I mean, fuck it. Another thing I think you're going to see, not just like, guys going for picks. And it's a little bit different dynamic in the NFL because of how contracts are set up and how you're able to retain players, in the long term, just with the NFL contracts. But you're going to start seeing guys who's like, okay, almost like the MLB. We know we're not going to re-sign Manny Machado. Let's trade him to get some picks or some value back. Like, it's going to be almost like there might be some more, marginal players or studs as well who they're like, okay, we don't really want to trade this guy, but he's one of our guys, but if we don't trade him, he's going to go into free agency and we're basically going to get nothing for him. That's going to be a big part of it too. It's not just going to be like studs who are coming for first rounders. It's going to be like guys who are like on their final year of their contract that they know a team is in tank mode, that they're not going to be able to re-sign or something like that. That might start coming into play as well. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think the dynamic shaping up the way it is going to really boost, like you said, it's going to boost the whole trade market and the trade deadline. I'm excited for it. It's going to be sweet.
You see the MLB and the NBA as well toward the trade deadline. You see some big names get moved, and really during the NFL, I feel like when we were younger, it wasn't always like that mid-season. You didn't really see many trades, especially trades that involved bigger names. Now all of a sudden, I mean, like you said, just this year, you see Marcus Peters get traded to the Ravens. You see Minka Fitzpatrick get traded to the Steelers for a first-round pick. And then this trade that sparked this discussion, Jalen Ramsey going to the Rams for 2 first-round picks. It's only going to improve ratings and talking points for the NFL. I mean, now if their trade deadlines heat up, I mean, God, sports media is just going to eat it up. They're going to continue to talk about it. They're going to hammer it home. It makes it exciting, though, seeing these big names get moved to different teams.
Yeah, and same thing like you mentioned, like in the offseason, it's the same way, and that we've been seeing a little bit of that already picking up, like I said, with Tunsil and OBJ, particularly OBJ, like those big name guys getting moved in the offseason. It just keeps that media train running to keep the NFL on as the number one talked about spotlight sport every month of the year. It's pretty wild. Like the NFL has got a good thing going on unless they let these refs fuck everything up.
They have the draft. They market their stars. Like
exactly.
They hype up the primetime games. Like you see advertisements for them everywhere. And they're spread across different networks, Fox, CBS, ESPN, and then their own network, NFL network, NBC. Like they're spread across different networks to where they can advertise across any one of them for their their big time
and they're
prime
getting
time
TV
games.
deals for billions of dollars on all these networks.
Yeah.
Like the competition for that is everywhere. The product they're putting on the field has never been better from a athlete and team standpoint, and actual game. If you kind of take away some of the talking points, like we mentioned, like the refs and some of the other goofy stuff that kind of gets in the way, but the product and so far as the athleticism and the talent and the football side of things has never been better. I mean, I'm excited about the NFL, and if they can just figure out these little things, it will just continue to dominate. And we even said, like, even if they don't fix the refs or whatever issues that arise, it's not going to keep people away from watching.
Now people love their football. It's not going to change. To get back to the roster construction strategy and, going all out for the championship versus, totally tanking to build your roster, I'm going to pose a question to you.
Before we get to that real quick, why do you think it took till now to get to where we are so far as like the tanking and this roster construction? You think there's only one thing, and it was kind of putting you on the spot of this
just in the NFL
point? Yeah. Like we've never really seen what we're seeing right now, and the NFL has been around for 100 years. So why is it all of a sudden like now? Is it the dollars? Is it Super Bowls and a team that gets to the Super Bowl is worth more than it ever has? Like, I wonder what the maybe it's just a discussion for another day. To really
it's an interesting question.
I
don't know. The NFL has become so reliant on the quarterback position that their value has always been high, but you used to be able to win games with a beast offensive line and a couple stud running backs. Like the running backs that's where it was at.
Like I mentioned, I think last week that I do want to get into at some point, maybe on a slow week, that we talk about, like, can you still win with a run game? And is that, is the time that we've seen over the past 10, 15 years of quarterback dominance or you don't win, is that slowly but surely passing? Is it past? Are we still in those years when it was just, a handful of guys, whether it's Manning, Brady, Roethlisberger, Rodgers, and Breeze, who are, it's either one of them or it's nobody else pretty much. But so let me derail your point there too much.
It's not going away from that. It'll always be centered around the quarterback.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
You got to have a quarterback to win. And if you hit on that one quarterback and can put a few pieces around him, protect him, get some weapons, you got a chance to turn your franchise, do a total 180 and turn them around. So, I think you saw, the Moneyball type movement in baseball start working for, obviously, where it started, the Oakland A's.
Yeah.
The Royals yielded a championship. I think maybe that's coming to the NFL, effective ways to invest your money and more so assets. If you realize you're going nowhere and you've got a couple studs, why keep paying them? What's the point of investing high dollars in players at other positions that don't impact the game? So now it's, okay, we have these assets, let's move them and acquire assets to build more so for the future.
And maybe answering my own question, maybe I just thought of this and maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe it's kind of goes back to, and like, answering the question, like, why now? Maybe it goes back to the question of, or the answer of, teams aren't losing money with bad product. Like no one's stopping watching the Browns when they fucking won one game in 2 years. So it's almost like teams have realized we're going to retain the money and the ticket sales and our TV deals regardless of how shitty our team is. So if we tank for a couple years and, kind of do this rebuild mode, nobody's going to go anywhere. We're not going to really lose any money. But then on the back end, we're going to make it up tenfold because we're going to be pushing for a Super Bowl.
If their plan is effective and, 3 years down the road, they start getting those players that have marginal revenue that bring back those dollars, it's not a significant loss.
So maybe that is the difference maker of teams realizing their revenues aren't really going to be impacted. So they can afford to suck for a couple years and do that rebuild, where in the past, when the league and just the whole dynamic of everything hasn't been the same as it is financially wise, they weren't willing to risk that, I guess. And the Browns, I think, were that first team to really say, fuck it. What else? What do we have to lose at this point? We've sucked for 20 years. what do we have to lose? And then teams have realized, oh, okay, they really didn't lose anything. They didn't lose fandom. They didn't lose revenue. They didn't lose anything. And it actually is looking like it probably worked pretty good. Let's do the same thing. Now they can take advantage of the fact that nobody's going to go anywhere, regardless of what product is on the field. Do you think the Dolphins fans are all of a sudden just going to not become Dolphins fans anymore? As long as that window's not too long, because it becomes a risky situation of you lose a generation of fans, which I think the Browns were on the cusp of that. Luckily, their fans go back, so many generations and have that such stronghold. But some organizations like the Dolphins in Miami.
Well, Miami, there's more to do. In Cleveland,
exactly.
There's
That's what I mean.
less to keep your mind occupied on.
If they suck too long, they might lose a generation of fans.
For sure.
Because they're going to just be disinterested. I mean, the Miami Heat were winning championships with LeBron James, and they won the one even with D Wade and Shaq, and people still barely show up to the finals games until like the second quarter.
It's a different dynamic, city to city.
It might be interesting to see what happens with that if they really continue to fuck up for too long. But I don't really think any NFL fans of their team are going to go really anywhere, and teams have afforded the opportunity to really suck and rebuild, and it's kind of paying off for at least. I mean, we'll see. I guess the Browns, they're not looking too great, but they got the pieces in place if they can kind of get it figured out.
Right. So back to the question I want to pose is
sorry to derail you there a little bit.
Not so much the teams in championship mode versus the teams that, all right, we got to clear house, trade our talented players to build for the future. What about the teams that are kind of what I call in limbo? They're right on that tipping point of being not quite average, but couple wins here and there could make them above average and flirt with playoffs, or a couple losses could put them on the other side of the tipping point and miss the playoffs, and they could flirt with that continuously with the roster they have. What is their move there? I'm going to switch it to baseball, and we can even get back to the NFL with a team like the Jaguars, who just made the decision to trade Ramsey, but like the Indians, our favorite team. Guess what? Their roster is still going to be good enough to contend for the division in the Central. But with a guy like Lindor.
Wasn't this year.
A guy like Lindor, his contract is close to being up. What if down the stretch in the season, they're right there in the playoff push? What is the best decision for especially a small market team? Do you trade your superstar Lindor?
You talking MLB?
Just in general, but I'm using MLB as I know it's kind of difficult sport to sport.
It is definitely difficult sport to sport for multiple reasons. One, baseball is, and like we talked about, and you can see it right now. So if you get into the playoffs in baseball, you can win a World Series. Look at the Nats right now. Wild card team just fucked up the Cardinals, and now they're in the World Series. Beat the best team in the NL. Roll through the Cardinals. Going to the World Series will probably end up losing because they have such a big layoff.
Anything can happen in football too, though.
They won too quickly in the NLCS. But the thing where I think it's different in baseball, like if you get to the playoffs, if you're a marginal team pushing for the playoffs, just get there, and then anything can happen. More so, and I think more sports. I mean, NFL, yes, sort of, but there's some different dynamics. But baseball, I think, if you're hot at the right time, just get into the playoffs, and you can win. Like the Indians in 2016 almost won it.
Sure.
Get into the playoffs. They won the division, but they weren't the best team. They're going to run. NBA, I think, is the biggest sport where being mediocre will fuck you, because one guy in the NBA will change your franchise.
For sure.
So if you're consistently the 6, 7, 8, even maybe missed the playoffs, 9, 10 seed, you're in the lottery, but not really. That range, you can get stuck in purgatory for a long fucking time, where you're just good enough to make the playoffs and just also good enough to miss out on good studs out of the NBA draft, where one guy can change your entire organization. So tanking is more effective in the NBA than I think anywhere, because if you get that one guy, if you get Zion, your team has changed.
Yeah.
You get LeBron James, your team has changed. MLB, I don't really think you're going to see a moment where you have a contending team on the cusp that just trades all their best players. You see it more so when teams are on the tail end of that, when they realize, okay, we're never going to win. I can't remember off the top of my head how many more years Lindor has. I think it's maybe 2 more, if not 3. I think next year there's really no risk really what happens to trade him, I would imagine, really depending on how things get derailed or not. But it's more like, okay, we have 2 good guys now. Let's trade them to give value because we're not going anywhere right now. But I don't know I guess what's the specific question that
but
you were looking
with
at?
the Indians, if they don't trade Lindor and
they'll trade him. They'll trade him.
I understand.
His final year of his contract, they're going to realize, okay, we're fucked.
But what if they're not fucked?
Oh, you're saying
what if toward the end they're really making a strong case and push for the playoffs? What is the right decision to do there as a team? Do you trade your team? I'm thinking long term.
I guess it depends on roster dynamic at the moment. Like if it's the Indians right now, like if it was this year where your roster is good enough to make the playoffs, perhaps, then yeah, you trade them probably. But if they're just going out dominating and really showing like, okay, this team has a legit shot to win it all, then no, you don't. But
do you make more moves to acquire a player to help that push in hopes that, basically what I'm asking is, does it make more sense to go all out if you're right there and you make an acquisition that can help make that push when your window is shrinking, or when your window is shrunk? Do you say, even if you can still squeak out another year of trying to contend, you start hitting that button of, okay, we got to move some
I think it's really
here.
difficult because you really have to look at the dynamic of the team from a GM's perspective. And there's a lot of pressure on the GM. Like, you really have to understand the dynamic of the locker room and the way things gel. And, is it 1 or 2 pieces away from really making a push, or are you just having high hopes and, overly optimistic of, okay, well, we did it a couple years ago with Josh Tomlin starting a couple starts. We could do it again. And then you fuck yourself. Like, there's a fine line of being overly optimistic and being realistic. Like, okay, yes, we can. And you kind of need a good GM to balance that, because you can really fuck an organization if you miss. If you, go all out, like you said, and, lose in the first round of the playoffs, that's going to set you back.
Oh, for sure.
Especially in small market teams, I think is more so than anything, because the revenue that you are expecting to generate through postseason sales of tickets and, just people coming to the ballpark and the ALCS, if you miss that, you're pretty much behind the 8 ball, because you don't have a whole lot of money to spend as it is, let alone, the fact that you didn't get revenue you were kind of projecting in the budget. Okay, if we spend this on this guy and then we get to the World Series, we'll make up our deficit and then we'll be set. But if you get swept out of the first round, or somehow you miss the playoffs barely, you're pretty much fucked.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a fine line between organization and organization. And like I said, small market teams is a hell of a lot different. Like, if a big market team misses on a couple free agents and they, really fuck up, they just buy more guys next season.
Right. No, there's so much. It's a very dynamic topic, and we could spend a lot of time talking about it in each sport.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of context involved, sport to sport, market to market. So I definitely agree with all your points you're saying. And let's be honest, just to hit on all the sports, MLB is the most difficult sport to construct a roster, because your draft picks are not developed until years down the road. Whereas you go to the NFL and back to the MLB, it's not like you can ride one stud batter and, fielder like the Angels with Mike Trout, best player in baseball. Guess what? That doesn't yield a bunch of wins.
He just signed Joe Madden as their manager today.
I saw that. You can't pair like a stud pitcher and a stud batter and fielder and think that's going to carry you. And their draft picks don't get, you don't see their impact, till years down the road. Whereas in the NBA, especially, you're only putting 5 people out there on the court. In free agency, if you hit on a big time superstar, and in the draft, if you hit, the number 1 pick, number 2 pick in, after a couple of years of development, and they become a superstar, it takes that one hit and you're a playoff contender as if you hit that superstar. And then in the NFL, it's the same thing. Your draft picks can make huge impacts as rookies, not just in the first round either. And when you have that quarterback, especially, and pieces around them, they can turn your franchise around so quickly. So that's why the MLB is really difficult.
Yeah, and also you're trading not just for picks, but like for 19-year-olds.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm going to basically give away some of my best players for 3 19-year-olds. And that's why you see such crazy deals in the MLB. Like, you'll get 3 top-level prospects because odds are one of them is going to not pan out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
It's not a given.
So it's
at
difficult
all.
really to really construct that. And like I said, it kind of goes back to you really need a guy as a GM who understands and kind of gets everything and kind of can evaluate talent. If you have a bad guy up at top, you're fucked. You trade your best guy. Oh, you know what? We're going to go for the future. We're going to trade our best guy, get a bunch of prospects. And if none of those really pan out to be anything, or only one of the 3 or 4, whatever it is, you're pretty much screwed, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so different dynamically between each sport. And, you can get one great quarterback, but if you don't have an offensive line, you get Andrew Luck. And
Right.
He retires.
Tim Couch.
Yeah. But then in the flip side, you go to the NBA, you get LeBron James, you're set no matter what happens. It's so different between each sport. I don't know anything about hockey, so I can't really comment on that.
No.
Fuck hockey. No, I do like hockey, but I don't know anything about hockey. It's just cool to watch. But I don't know. It's so different. It's hard to kind of compare all of them, but it's interesting to see how when you look at the comparisons, each league is kind of doing sort of the same things now with like the tanking and trading, top level picks or prospects for talent that can help you right now. Like, it's interesting how it all kind of shapes out. And the NBA is kind of a little bit different because there's like a set level of superstars that if you have one of those, you're going to be good. If you don't, well, you're behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Yeah, I think the NBA is a mess, and I want to get into it when it gets a little bit closer to that season. But I find this topic interesting.
For sure.
Sport to sport, strategies on roster construction, just going all in for a championship. As a fan, I love seeing it. And like, if you're the Phillies, you went all out with, topping your salary cap out and paying a luxury tax, knowing you were going to sacrifice your future by trading prospects and whatnot for it. But guess what? It yielded at least one World Series, so you have that to hang your hat on. Right. Whereas a team like the Reds, had a bunch of big name players.
I thought you were going on them right now, and then they do all that and just miss playoffs. So.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, I see what you're saying.
No, back when they did win a World Series, they went through a really bad stretch, but you could at least say, hey, we got a fucking World Series.
The Tigers, I don't think won the World Series, but they went to at least one.
Right. No, they went to a couple.
Yeah.
And they didn't get it done. So spent all that money.
It's probably going to be, honestly, when we look back, it's probably going to be a similar situation with the Indians, except we didn't spend a lot of money because we didn't have a lot of money to spend, but kind of similar situation of going all out for a season or two, not, holding on. And I guess we'll see what happens in the next couple of years, but potentially holding on to talent you could get value for and rebuild, but not. I don't know. The Indians have done a really good job of balancing
they
that,
have,
though, and being
especially
relevant
with
for
their
so
market.
long. Yeah, they've been relevant for so many years.
But that's the thing. Depending on the market, you can afford to go all out for a championship, and then you're not hurting for money. You can still recover in a shorter period of time. Whereas the Indians, if that owner decided, fuck it, I'm going to go all out and spend all this money, say they even win a championship, then sacrifice their future, like they have to worry about money coming in after that when their team totally sucks for the next 7 years. So there's a lot of it's a dynamic topic. It's kind of interesting, especially sport to sport. So switching gears over to college football, Ryan, we have our first major upset affecting the playoff picture. South Carolina takes down Georgia in double overtime.
At Georgia, too. That just... Wasn't it at Georgia?
It was at Georgia.
Wild scene down there in Athens. I don't know what the fuck they were doing. Thumb up the ass kind of thing. Dude, I've been hammering Jake Fromm as being a stud.
He was not good.
He was not good.
No, he was not good. I was on board with you on on Jake Fromm.
I'm still on board with Jake.
It just doesn't seem like he gets the same recognition as some of the other quarterbacks. But yeah, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. I mean, he was making some pretty suspect decisions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure reflecting back on our first episode when we were doing our preview, I think I made the comment that if it were me and the Dolphins with the first pick, I'd pick Jake Fromm as my quarterback. Ooh, I don't know. That'd make me look pretty bad there on Saturday. But I still got faith in Jake Fromm, but they sucked the other night.
Georgia was favored by 21.
Wow.
21, and they lost by 3, man.
Helps.
The over-under was 52.
52
ended up 20-17. Damn.
Yeah, I mean, I followed the Iowa-Michigan lead and hammered the under of that Iowa-Penn State under, which I can't remember what it was. I think 40-something. I got in at 45 just after kickoff.
43.5.
43.5 was it when it was set? Ooh, maybe I got more. That's pretty wild. I thought it went down from when I initially looked at it right before the game, but I didn't get it in. But I ended up getting a live bet during the game early in the first quarter. I think it's 45.5 is what I ended up betting, and I betted the under, and it was handedly under.
Yeah,
I was not concerned whatsoever during that game.
17-12.
Like I said, after watching that, I was kind of pissed at myself that I wasn't really paying attention during Michigan-Iowa, which was a upper 40s spread or something like that. Wasn't really paying attention, and we were looking back like, why the fuck did we not just hammer that under all day?
Yeah, that was a given.
I couldn't pass up the opportunity again when I saw upper 40s Penn State, Iowa. But yeah, it was an interesting weekend. Obviously with Georgia losing, it's going to shake things up a little bit. I don't really know what major impact that's going to have. Obviously, it has some with the SEC teams. We talked about the potential for 3 SEC teams getting into the college football playoffs. That's more or less eliminated at this.
Yeah, it makes it. It's only 1 game, so I mean Georgia could still win out and go to the SEC championship game and win. They have the talent to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Does Alabama play LSU?
Yeah.
So, I guess
no,
back to our hypothetical
you could still have 3
Alabama,
11-1.
Alabama
SEC
beats LSU.
teams.
That's LSU's only loss. Alabama goes undefeated, loses to a Georgia team in the SEC championship.
It's gonna depend on what happens outside. I mean,
damn, I was getting my hopes up a little bit, thinking that would. I mean, it definitely is a knock them down.
You need him to lose. I mean, it only makes sense
for sure.
So, that was the first significant upset of the year when you're talking about teams in the playoff picture. Georgia still has a solid win over Notre Dame, and they're going to get the opportunity to play Florida and then LSU or Alabama likely in the SEC championship game. So that LSU Alabama game is going to be really good, and then we'll see down the road what shapes up in the SEC.
It almost gets to the point we want one of those teams to just win every single game.
Right, I know.
Win them all.
Just to guarantee one
take the number 1 seed and give a fuck.
Before we get to the other LSU game, let's flip it to the Big 12 Red River rivalry.
Hey.
Oklahoma over Texas, 34-27.
Yeah, I didn't catch that game. I think I mentioned it on last week's podcast. I was out playing country club, out golfing at our 11:45 tee, so I didn't really catch any of that. I think at the turn I grabbed some beers and I saw the score. It was pretty close. It's like 10-7 or 10-3 or something like that early on.
Yeah, it was really close early on.
And so I don't really know what happened from that point where all the points came from, because I think that might have even been third quarter. But
I'll tell you where they came from. CeeDee Lamb, bro, is a dog receiver.
Yeah. So 10-3 in the third quarter is when I saw it. And I was like, ooh, close game. And then all of a sudden I was like, what the fuck? These points came out of nowhere.
I unfortunately decided to watch my favorite team, Michigan, allow Illinois to score 25 unanswered points and get within a field goal during the third quarter. Should have been watching Oklahoma, Texas, but I digress. Back to Oklahoma, Texas. Oklahoma, bro, has a defense this year better than compared to what they've typically fielded on defense, they're much improved this year. And obviously,
most definitely. I mean, Texas team that I've kind of been harping as my pick for the Big 12, which I still think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a rematch again, and
tough to beat a team twice.
Right. That's kind of, I think, what I said in my prediction is Oklahoma's probably going to win the game in the regular season. They're going to rematch, and Texas is going to take down the conference and beat Oklahoma there. But like you mentioned, I mean, Texas with Ellinger, that's my guy, held them to 27 points. And with all the talent they have on that offense, I don't know, man. Is that defense all the way here or what? I don't know.
I don't know about all the way compared to, the top-notch defenses you see in college, but they're definitely most improved. And with Lincoln Riley and their studs on offense, man, I don't know. Maybe it's good enough to get them over the hump in the playoffs, because they've gone to the first round of the playoffs 3 times. They've lost to Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama. What's going to put them over the hump here? They're always going to field an explosive offense. Maybe now their defense is marginally better compared to their standards. That's enough.
That's the thing. I mean, there's so many teams that we've been mentioning, and you kind of mentioned a few of them right there. It's like, are they? Yes, they're good enough to beat Texas.
Right.
And they're good enough to beat Texas and hold them to 27 points. But are they good enough to beat Alabama, Ohio State? Even let's throw in LSU, Georgia, Clemson, all these other teams. Like, that's kind of where the test comes in. But I mean, holding Ellinger to 210 yards, no touchdowns, Colin Johnson to 82 yards. I mean, they look pretty good, I guess. I mean, like I said, I didn't really see the game, but looking at the stats, they look like they might be, their defense is legit enough for their offense to kind of be their offense and dominate and hold them into games and be able to push them, over the top in close games to keep them close enough that they're able to kind of dominate offensively enough to kind of get wins when it really matters. But I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to kind of see how things shake up in the whole dynamic of the college football playoffs. I guess we're halfway through the season now. I still think whatever rankings they're showing on TV are kind of fucked up and bullshit. I think you sent me a BCS rankings the other day, which looked pretty legit to what I would, personally rank.
A lot closer.
Yeah, definitely, my personal, and it might actually be pretty much, locked in, because when you sent me what you think you would have, leading up to the podcast, I think you had Penn State a little bit lower. I said they, as an undefeated team, should be a little bit higher. The BCS was kind of there as well. So if you look up the BCS rankings, I don't have them on hand, but if those were, what we saw those from the other day when you showed them to me, I thought those were pretty good. So, and it kind of goes back to the point of rankings are kind of bullshit at this point of the season, but it's going to be cool to see how things shape out with these big games, much like what we just saw with Florida LSU Saturday night. That game was fucking awesome.
It is the best game. Well, really, 2 of the best games of this year happened on Saturday, obviously with Oklahoma, Texas. That was a very exciting game. Watching what I could, backtracking, watching that. And then got to tune in to LSU, Florida. What's crazy
awesome game.
is Florida on the road at LSU. That quarterback that was playing never started in high school, and the announcers reminded everyone of that at least 50 times.
See, I didn't even know. We didn't really have the audio on. We were kind of just hanging around, shooting the shit, drinking beers, and watching
which is great. I mean, props to him for staying strong and continuing to develop there. But dude, he stood. I mean, his poise in the pocket was awesome. He was very patient, delivered the ball on time. Florida's offense looked pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of things that I saw the week before when they played Auburn, which was really the first time. I mean, I watched a decent amount of that first week when they played Miami.
God, that game was ugly.
Yeah, that game wasn't. I mean, it was just kind of an ugly game, and then it was clear towards the end, while it was still really close, that Miami just really had no shot on their offensive line. So I mean, that game aside, the first time I really saw them play was against Auburn, and I was super impressed. Their offense, their receiving core is electric and dynamic. This Trask dude, like you mentioned, he's for real. I think their defense is pretty damn good, particularly when compared to kind of some recent years in the past. But I think Florida is for real, man. Obviously, they didn't get it done this weekend against LSU. Ended up dropping 42 on them, but I think they're a little bit for real, man.
No, they're good. Dan Mullen has it going on there. Last year, got a 10-win season, hammered Michigan, and now this year, I mean, they got off to a hot start and seriously gave a pretty damn good fight up against LSU, on the road. So obviously, they got to play Georgia being in the East. I still think Georgia comes out of the East, but I think Florida is going to put another 10-win season together. They've got Emory Jones in waiting at quarterback. He played a little bit against LSU. He is a 5-star quarterback, very dynamic. If Dan Mullen found his quarterback there to ride with, Florida could be really good in the future because right now they look like a well-coached team. They've had injuries and they still are going out there and performing and going toe-to-toe with the likes of LSU who look really fucking good.
And we talk about how their defenses look pretty good. I mean, their defense doesn't look great, but it looks good enough. But at the same time, it looks like good enough, but not quite good enough to really win a championship or really contend for a championship.
They beat the majority of teams in college football outside, that top 6, top 7 range. That's where they fall.
Like they're really good, but just not quite
not quite
good
there
enough. Which I think is really going to be the point that kind of pulls them back a little bit. Because offensively, I think, like you kind of just mentioned, they are good enough to compete with some of those best teams in the country. But defensively, they're just not quite there enough. They got, shelled on the run. Burrow balled fuck out again, which he might, have leaped into the lead of the Heisman if you really want to get down to
Dude, he's legit. His numbers are asinine this year.
And when, he puts them up against Florida. So I think Florida is, like I mentioned, they're like you said, 10-win team, but just not quite there yet. But they're close.
Right. They're close. I like Dan Mullen a lot. Going to LSU, usually the story with them is they field stud running backs and an elite defense. And ironically this year, it's more so, their defense maybe isn't quite as elite as they're typically used to. Still solid, but it's their offense, man. Joe Brady coming over from the Saints, working with Joe Burrow. Their receivers are freaking awesome. Jamar Chase, Jefferson, Terrence Mitchell, and their running game is legit as well. Joey Burrow, 21 of 24, 293 yards and 3 tutties, dude. I mean, that's just insane.
He's serious,
3
man.
incompletions.
25 tuds on the season with only 3 picks. And, they just have talent across that entire offense. Like you mentioned, their defense isn't as dominant, but
compared to their standards.
Right.
I mean,
but
they still have good defenders on that side of the ball.
But their offense is just all for real in all aspects. I mean, you kind of mentioned the top names there, but it's going to be hard to stop them. I'm interested to see kind of where things shape up, when they play these next couple games. After next week, they got Auburn and then Alabama on the road against Alabama. I don't know. It's gonna be tricky for them to win that game, obviously. And I mean, if they beat Auburn, they almost guarantee themselves a slot in the college football playoff at this moment because I don't see them losing. Pulling up their schedule, they got Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas A&M to close out the season. Obviously, Mississippi State next week. So after Mississippi State, you got Auburn, Alabama, and then a bunch of scrubs. So as long as you don't lose both of those games, you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself a slot I'm trying to think of different scenarios, like if they lose to Auburn and then beat Alabama and then lose in the SEC championship,
It would
get there
be-
and lose. Like maybe that's the situation, but
You'd
if they
have
beat
to
Auburn,
have you'd have to have Oklahoma like lose to Texas, kind of like you're thinking in the Big 12. I think like you're
Well,
still
yeah.
going to need
I'm
to
saying-
get two teams from the same conference. You're still going to need outside conferences to really falter, like the Big 12, for example, with Oklahoma, and maybe the Big 10, where Ohio State and Wisconsin exchange a loss in the regular season, but then the losing team beats the winning team in
Right.
the conference champ. Something has to happen like that.
yeah, that would be interesting to see. One loss Big Ten. Let's say the loser of the Ohio State Wisconsin game loses in the Big Ten championship. They both have one loss. They each played one more game than LSU. That's only losses to Alabama. If I was a gambling man, I'd probably say LSU gets in over that one loss team that just lost their first game in the Big Ten championship. Like, just because that's this thing we've seen shape up. Like, it'd be real fucked up that an undefeated team has to play an extra game, then lose, and has one more win on their resume than an LSU. But I wouldn't really be surprised to see, that happen. For
Right.
sure, wouldn't be surprised, especially if Alabama just wins every single game and is number one seed and everything like that. So it's almost to the point, in my opinion, that, obviously, like you mentioned, some different things have to kind of shape out, which it seems like they always do. Teams lose. We don't really see all undefeated teams in the college football playoff. We haven't, and we probably don't really anticipate seeing it this year. But if LSU beats, they handle their business against the teams they should, those Mississippi State, Arkansas, Texas A&M, and then they ultimately beat Auburn. I think, at that point, you beat Auburn, you're in almost.
You're close. Yeah,
You know what
you're
I mean?
damn fucking
Even
close.
if you lose to that Alabama and then run the table and miss out on the SEC championship, you're probably in, which is kind of fucked up. But that's just the reality of the college football playoff that we have at stake
They're
right
good
now.
enough,
It's just
though,
how it
like-
is. Right. That's the thing. Like,
It's
you're
not like
going to
they're-
leave that team out that, okay, their only loss is to the best team in the country who hasn't lost a single game all season. And you're going to leave them out, even if it's, an Ohio State team. Let's say, for instance, that their only loss is to a one-loss Wisconsin and their one loss is to Ohio State. Like, it's kind of are they really as good as they say they are?
Yeah,
Because
but
they've only beat each other.
are they gonna pick the Big Ten champion in that case to get into the playoffs?
Oh yeah, sure, they'll probably do that.
So they'll pick one, but then LSU gets that last spot.
probably, yeah. That's what I mean.
Right.
Clemson, you're
No,
assuming
I'm
they
with
win
you.
all their games.
Assuming Clemson is in, SEC champion Bama is in. Now your two spots left are Oklahoma, Big Ten champion LSU, who's
If
what's
Oklahoma
happening there.
runs a table, Ohio State runs a table, it's going to make things a lot easier. But it'll be interesting to see. But I don't know. LSU,
It would be crazy if we have a playoff where all four teams are
dude.
undefeated.
It'd be fucking awesome. I'd love it.
Clemson should not lose a fucking game.
They shouldn't. They almost did.
If they lose a game, just scratch that. They should not even be in the top four right now in your rankings. So if they lose a game, they should be scratched out of consideration.
What would be extra interesting is let's say Clemson just doesn't roll. Let's say they have some tight games, but they win them all. Do you put a one-loss SEC team?
Ooh, man.
An LSU that missed? No, there's no way they do that.
No,
I take that back.
it is
There's
really
no
difficult
shot.
to go undefeated. Even though,
Yeah.
look,
The
I
only
get
way
it.
a
Their
one
conference is cake. I get that, but it's still challenging to go undefeated in college football. So if they go undefeated and win, the conference championship, staying undefeated, I feel
They're
like you got to put them.
They're in. They're in for sure. It'll be interesting, though. I'd like to see if an SEC team, Alabama undefeated, kicks ass and they lose in the SEC championship. Who do you put in? They have one extra win. It's an interesting kind of perspective to look at it, but it's still so far away. That's all it is interesting. There's nothing that's really going to be meaningful
Right.
to the conversation because there's so many things that can happen and certainly will because, like you mentioned, the odds that they're all undefeated teams would be sweet. I'd love it. Because it would really see like the best of the best, but it's not going to happen.
No,
It's not going to happen.
No.
It would be sweet.
No, the Ohio State-Wisconsin game is definitely going to be really intriguing. And
yes,
You mentioned the Big 12, how it's likely going to be Oklahoma, Texas again in the conference championship. And in the Big 10, it's likely going to be Ohio State, Wisconsin again.
Well,
they play each other, and it's difficult in college
Wisconsin
football.
wasn't in last year, though.
It's difficult in college football to beat a team twice on the same schedule. So it's not like Wisconsin is a bad team either. Like I like Ohio State.
Wisconsin's legit.
I like Ohio State to win the Big Ten still, but Wisconsin, they're a really good football team. It is, even if Ohio State beats them in the regular season, beating them again is not going to be an easy task.
I'm in the camp of, if you win, if you're one of those main teams in it and you won the conference championship, you should be in.
Oh, yeah.
You should be in. When Ohio State gets left out for an SEC team that didn't play in their conference championship, that's not right to me. It's fucked up. You played an extra game. That should be worth something. And which kind of leaves Notre Dame at a disadvantage. They're not going to have that extra game. They should be at a disadvantage. That's their fault. They're fucked. They didn't have an opportunity, but at the same time, hey, it's their fault. I want to see, like you mentioned, winning games is difficult in college football, especially against, formidable opponents. And if you win a conference championship, that means you played one of the best teams in your conference postseason, pretty much, if you want to call it that. Postseason. That should be worth more than anything. That should be worth more than, your only loss is to one of the better teams in the country and you didn't play in that conference championship game. Well, you should have fucking beat them in the regular season then.
Yeah, see,
we're talking about LSU or Alabama, whichever one kind of wins that game.
I don't like weighing the quality of the loss. Like, your only loss is to one of the better teams. I like weighing the quality wins more. So
I agree.
Winning the conference championship is a quality win. During the regular season, what was your strength of schedule? Were you getting even if you lost a game, whether it was to a shit opponent or to one of the better teams on your schedule, do you have other quality wins? Did you beat quality teams on your schedule to get into the playoffs? That's what I look for.
Yeah, a quality win should mean more than a bad loss, in my opinion.
Right. It's just like Ohio State when they won the national championship. They lost to a Virginia Tech team who ended up being very mediocre in college football. Yeah. And guess what? They were playing their best football toward the end of the season. They rattled off big wins, absolutely stomped Wisconsin in the conference championship, and got into the playoffs. So that's what I want to see. I want to see good wins.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, I think we mentioned it before, like Alabama, it was that same situation. Should Alabama be in? They had one, if you want to quote unquote, good loss versus Ohio State losing to, I can't remember if that was a Purdue or Iowa. It was one of them. But Alabama gets in, they win it all.
Right.
Should Ohio State gotten in? Probably. I mean, in my opinion, maybe it's a little bit biased, but probably. Like I said, I account good wins over bad loss, and I think that might have been the year that Ohio State won the Big Ten. Alabama didn't even go to the conference championship. And I could be getting my years mixed up and my facts a little bit, missed. But I think that's what I thought I remembered. But like, I'm with you. Like, good wins should mean more than bad losses all day long.
Yeah. So, football continues. Obviously, MLB World Series coming up. We kind of hit on it very briefly earlier, but Nationals beating that ass over the Cards. My God.
Yeah, I might have to finally start paying attention to the MLB playoffs here at the World Series. I think my favorite moment in sports, if it's definitely up there if it's not my favorite, is to watch is when the winning team of the World Series gets that last out or gets the last run and they fucking party and cheer on the field like 6-year-olds winning a Pee Wee League T-ball championship. Like, that's my favorite moment, is watching the winning team record that last out or that last run and just be a little kid again. That's my favorite. So I definitely don't want to miss that. And I think I might have to get all the way back in on the MLB and hear that the World Series are on. I haven't really watched any of the playoffs thus far, but I might get on board for the
same. No, I'll definitely tune in to the World. I'm kind of riding this Nationals train. I like it.
Yeah, man. I do too. First time they've been a World Series in the nation's capital since 1940 something or something crazy like that.
It's been a long time.
The Expos tradition, moving to DC, the whole thing. I'm on board, man. I'm on board.
Yeah.
Fuck the AL teams, both of them. I hope they both lose all their best players to fastballs to the kneecap before the World Series. Whoever wins that series, fuck them. I'm all the way Nats.
All in on the Nats.
And I'd love to see a Bryce Harperless Washington Nationals win the World Series. That'd be pretty cool too.
You know what's funny? As a fan, we can say shit like that, and I totally agree. Like, Harper is a douche, but guess what he's doing at home right now? Sitting on his pile of millions of dollars.
Good for him. Doesn't take anything away from me wanting to see him not win.
Hell yeah.
So fuck him.
But
I'm all on board.
So sports right now is, this is the best time for sports when you got
it is.
MLB playoffs. Football is almost at the midway point in college and NFL, and NBA is right around the corner. I mean, this is like peak sports talk time. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Real quick, when you mentioned the NBA, I'm real into the NBA. I enjoy it very much. So I'm really looking forward to talking a lot of NBA on this podcast. And I don't know about you, but I'm really kind of looking forward to watching the Cavs this year. They have a lot of young talent. I don't really think they're going to be, a really team that's going to be pushing for anything spectacular, playoff wise or otherwise. But I'm just excited to kind of dive into the NBA a little bit and really get into what the Cavs are doing, and I'm looking forward to watching them. Last year, wasn't really enthusiastic. LeBron left, and I really wasn't all that excited to watch the Cavs, and I watched them a decent bit, but it wasn't the anticipation leading up to the season wasn't like it is right now, and I do plan to bring a lot of that to the podcast, and especially the NBA as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Like the NBA, they advertise their stars. I mean, it's a fun league to talk about.
And let's not forget college basketball too,
Oh, hey, I like college basketball still. I know some people kind of shit on it and say, the NBA is so much better. I'm still passionate about college basketball, so I definitely want to get into that and the NBA. Basically talk the three major sports. Fuck hockey. We're not doing that.
Looking forward to that. Looking forward to continuing this podcast. As we've said in the past, we're wrapping up episode, I don't know what. I think I said that last week, and I still don't fucking remember this week, but fuck it. Anyways, we'll see you all next week. And if you are tuning in this previously to the Browns breakdown that we're about to get into, check out our Browns breakdown on the channel as well, which we're about to record here in about 2 minutes. So check that out. Jeffrey, it's been a great pleasure.
As always.
Peace.